What we did was implement an opportunity for our customer success folks to tag challenges with customers, in the tool, right? And, over the course of the year, we would train the team to say, okay, if you've seen a challenge, that is product related, it's really a pain point, tag it here, articulate the problem. And our customer experience team or customer experience management team would basically pull those roadblocks, is what we call them, together and then share that at a larger level with the senior executive leadership team to say, from a data perspective, these are the roadblocks. This is the biggest pain points that are hitting our customers, and we need you to take some action on it. And where does this fall within your remit, within the roadmap?
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. We're your hosts, Brendan Denewell, CEO and co-founder of Dynamico,
and Amy Weaver, Dynamico's marketing director. You've had a really long tenure at HubSpot.
Sure have.
Starting in 2010. I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could walk us through just really briefly, kind of the progression of your role there and how it has informed your thoughts on the customer experience and customer success.
Yeah. So back in 2010, we were starting a new team at HubSpot called the customer success team, or account management team. We hadn't done it before. We had literally had a group of onboarding specialists. We had some professional services, and we really hadn't figured out, what does this customer management look like? At the time, it was a lot about collecting money, believe it or not. And we didn't really have a strategy. So I joined at the impetus of us creating this nascent customer success team and strategy. I was one of the first CSMs that we hired, or account managers. Maybe we had a team of 10. So that first year or so was really figuring out, how do you segment your customers? What's the engagement look like? What are you talking to your customers about? And that was really sort of the pivotal moment to determine, okay, our customer success managers not only, checking in, providing value, they really shouldn't be collecting money, right? That's for a different team.
Mm-hmm.
But it's how do they become a real helpful resource that the customer can rely on and trust. And then from that, point of, oh, actually, this person's actually giving me some valuable information. They're knowledgeable. There's a conversation that you're having that's talking about what's next with your business strategy and how does HubSpot fit into that. So that was really sort of those first initial years. And then, from there, I had a really great opportunity, got selected to be part of our initial team that went to our first international office. So as a founding member of our HubSpot team, shout out to HubSpot, which is such a big organization now. At the time, I was hired to hire and manage and run our customer success team in Dublin. And I was meant to be there just for a year to build out that team, get them set up. And at the end of the year, the opportunity came up to say, hey, this is something that's doing really well, and we see an opportunity for you to stay here and continue to grow and expand it. And I went down that path, and it's served me really well. It's been a wild ride, jumping in at around, where HubSpot was around 3 million in ARR in EMEA, and exiting, 10 years ago, or 10 years after that, later. Yep. Where we were like 392 million in ARR. I mean, it's just like an insane amount of growth over just 10 years.
Yeah.
And figuring out, how do you successfully set up a team? How do you scale that team? What are the resources that team needs? How do you align, with your global counterparts and, make sure that the culture as well as the support mechanisms are in place for that growing, scaling team and customer base.
Right. Well, you're touching on a lot of these things, but what challenges come up when you're going through a period of rapid growth like that?
Oh my God. I mean,
do we have time?
Do we have time? I guess it's like, in what category of challenges do you want to talk?
Right.
I mean, that could be from like product to, alignment challenges to, helping the business understand your unique challenges just as a team or an organization. I think
Right.
there's numerous categories of challenges.
A lot of times we look at it from a lens of you have your foundation of the people.
Yeah.
And then your process, loads of data, and then the technology.
Yep.
And you seem, to me, pretty passionate on the team aspect of things and building those repeatable, scalable processes. So if you want to talk in context of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the challenge is we hired an incredibly smart, talented team in EMEA, mainly in Dublin at first, and then we, started to look beyond Dublin and in Germany and Berlin and beyond. But we had this incredibly gifted team that were doing and innovating a process of how we, think about customer success, how we treat our customers. Not only were we achieving our targets, we were exceeding our targets. We were really doing incredible stuff. And they wanted not just to be an EMEA segment, but to drive something at a global level. And I think in those initial days, the challenge or some of the, the rub was really around how do you take a regional team that has lots of ambition, lots of drive, and is doing innovative things and take that to a global scale and help the business understand that this is not just something niche for, this particular region, but it really could work at a larger level. And that, I think, in the beginning was really hard to prove out because obviously, global has their strategy and we had lots of ideas on how we can continue to evolve and improve it. And it was kind of figuring out what's the right approach to help the team get visibility, help global and the rest of the organization understand the importance of having a connected philosophy and taking in various opinions outside of, maybe that region or the group that they were supporting.
So I would call that alignment, aligning the global teams. What are some things that you did to try to achieve that?
So one thing was, my role reported in to our EVP of customer success. So all of the global heads of the customer success organization reported into our chief customer officer, for lack of a better term. It's our, the head of our customer success organization. And so we had regional leaders like myself, a regional leader in APAC and myself. And then we had, global heads of the various divisions within customer success. We were all reporting into the same person and working collaboratively. I think that really helped provide some insight at that level to say, hey, what are we trying to achieve, not just within, a region, but how do we connect the dots here? How do we pull these teams together? How do we get operating models that are not just a bunch of folks that are based in Cambridge or North America at the time, because we weren't really a remote company way back then, but to pull in various voices and, various folks that have, unique perspectives at a global level, because our international customer base was just growing so fast. And to not have that perspective at the table when we're building out strategy was a real misstep at the start, right? So it was helping, the business understand that, hey, diversity and, bringing in a global connected strategic group together to figure out a challenge or to work together on a problem. It was going to slow things down a bit, right? Because that's obviously the challenge, but would ultimately prove better results for our customers and for the experience that they were feeling.
Colleen, I have a sort of a more of a personal curiosity question for you regarding some of the, because every year for the last, let's say for the last 3 or 4 years, when we, have the sort of ecosystem kickoff or the partner kickoff at the beginning of each year, we're always shown, how some regions, how regions are growing in relation to each other, whether it's EMEA or APAC or, North America, et cetera. With you having, a lot of experience, obviously, in the growth of EMEA, but then also always having the lens of what was going on in North America, what would you say were the fundamental differences in why EMEA, grew so well, and how is that different to the growth that occurred in North America?
Yeah, it's a good question, and one that frequently was asked of me because people were trying to really sort of figure out what that secret sauce was. Like,
And
why
replicate
can't we
it.
replicate that in North America? And of course, not that I want to toot my own home, but I do think we hired some really great folks, and we had some deep alignment within our EMEA teams across go-to-market. So people talk a lot about pod structures. We actually never officially had a pod structure in which your CSM is working, in a official capacity with a sales rep or with a contract manager. But some of that just naturally happened because of language, right? You were hiring some of the first French, team members, and they not only came together because they all speak French, but they're all trying to figure out, how do we break into the French market? What is this going to look like? So let's sit down after work and have a beer together and talk about that, right? Casually, and build out like a unique strategy. So I think one that comes down to really passionate people that wanted to do something unique in their region, make a mark, grow it. And, some of that was just naturally happening because they all, had that same connectivity of language and culture. And, obviously that brought them together in a way that you couldn't force, so to speak.
Yeah.
So a lot of that was happening in pockets, and there was a healthy competition to some degree against, regions, like jovially, like wasn't, there was no animosity there, but there was certainly like, how do we continue to be the best in this region, and how do we break further through? And, in these initial stages where we were growing our customer install base and trying to tap into opportunities to help these customers scale, that tight relationship between sales and CS and understanding, oh, here's an opportunity here, here's where we can align, here's where we could dig in and solve for them better, really helped, I think, developed in that secret sauce. And that I wish I could say we collaborated deeply and made happen, but I think it happened somewhat naturally just given the state of the team.
Yeah, really interesting. So it's almost like, so in Europe, which is, one of the reasons I think I'm curious about that, other than the fact that we hear it, at least once a year from HubSpot, is, so Dynamico was actually started in EMEA, but that was before we even knew what HubSpot was. And of course, when we became HubSpot partners in 2014, which is also, I think, prior to EMEA. When did EMEA start?
Oh, 2012, really.
Oh, it was 2012, yeah.
It was, January 2013, but I moved over there in 2012. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so I just, sort of understanding and having come from EMEA, in that space, and then, but of course, really growing and being a partner in North America was part of my curiosity. But it was really interesting how you were talking now about the fact that you had, let's say, the French market and the German market, and then maybe the English-speaking market between Ireland and the UK, were essentially competing with each other to see who would grow, faster, which maybe hasn't existed in North America, which is just this one large market where that doesn't exist. So
yeah, and also like we had a really great dynamic in our office in Dublin. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to go there, but
I'm very excited. I'm actually going there this summer.
Oh, you are? Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. I've been wanting to go for forever, and it's finally happening this summer. I haven't even told anyone at HubSpot yet that we're going to be there.
This is news to me.
All right, hot off the press. Here we go.
Yeah.
make sure that they roll out, the red carpet for you.
Yeah.
It's a great office, and people still go into the office in the Dublin office. So there's a great buzz to it, right?
Right.
Which really didn't die down even through COVID. People wanted to, come in and engage. And again, like you're all sitting in the same office, you're all speaking the same language. I mean, you'd walk into the office and it was like the United Nations, like everybody's on their headphones and, there's just a buzz around the whole place, just, all these European languages, people are getting really excited and working together and collaborating, and you just hit the floor and there's something really great about being there.
Yeah. So you're all speaking the same language, but you're not all speaking the same language.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Very cool. That's awesome.
So we didn't talk about this when I spoke to you before, but there were some ways that you have found you can keep your team on the positive side of using data and technology that's available to them as an asset versus it becoming a liability.
Yep.
So if you could kind of elaborate your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. When you introduce technology, I mean, there's that sort of initial nervousness. How is this going to make my job more complicated? What does this mean for me? And how is it ultimately, going to make, hopefully, my life easier? And that's hard, right? Change is hard. I think, and with any, introduction, whether it's a new metric or a new technology, you've really got to hone in on how does this connect to our mission, our strategy, and, make that tangible connection to the team and get some champions in earlier. Like, obviously, depending upon what that technology looks like, if there has been a previous challenge with it, that you can, help the team understand what that challenge was and how this piece of technology will essentially help, whether it's collaboration or alignment or time management. Ultimately, it's helping them understand, what's the strategy. How are we going to set you up for success with this new piece of technology, whether that's training and how it will help them in the long run. I think that there's, aspect of we teach you this tool and this is a skill you have for life. You know how to use this. You add this to your resume. You sort of build upon that. It's less of, this is just something we need you to do in this moment in time, but this is an important thing despite, you working here. And I think also, helping the team understand that you are willing to pivot and change as you roll things out, that you're collecting feedback, you're learning, you're telling the team how you're learning and how, that this rollout is going, whether there's things you need to do to, enhance the experience, go back to the technology, pause. I think with any large rollout, whether that's technology or not, there is a moment of, okay, how is this going? What do we need to do to improve this? And how are we listening to the team that's executing on this? Versus sort of taking that more bullish approach of, this will be rolled out in this timeline at period end of, right? I think that people understand, okay, there's a goal we're trying to get to. We've given ourselves some buffer here, but we need to get to that goal, right? But along the way, there's going to be certain milestones in which we will, talk, learn, listen, pivot, but we're still trying to get to that goal.
Yeah, which is that vision and strategy component that you say that sort of everything starts and ends with making sure that they have that sort of clear North Star.
That's right.
Yeah.
The North Star. Well, you mentioned trying to get the customer success teams onto HubSpot.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe some hiccups through that process. So what did it look like?
That's a battle wound. I mean, what's the Holy Grail? The Holy Grail is to have all teams on one tool talking to each other simply for not only the experience of your teams, but for the experience for the customer, right?
Absolutely.
You're a brand new customer and you just told your sales rep, this is why I bought HubSpot. And then 5 other people ask you, why did you buy HubSpot? What's the frustration from the customer? I just told 3 other people or 5 other people this. Am I going to have to reiterate myself again? I love, that's a pain point, right? That's a sharp edge that the customer feels. And every time they say the same thing, they roll their eyes and say, why isn't HubSpot talking to each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So moving on to 53 until, this manna state or, whatever, this holy grail was, a real pivotal point for not only improving the customer experience, but improving the alignment between our go-to-market teams. And at HubSpot, we like to say we are crafted, not cobbled. I'm sure you both have heard that from the mouths of our HubSpot product team. And while I love it, it is so true. We are crafted. We take such a really unique approach to building out our product and infrastructure. That comes with its own challenges as well, because even though we have a dedicated product team that is focused on building out tools for our internal teams, priorities change, emergencies come up, and as much as you can plan and ask for the right resources and tools, we just ran into a bunch of challenges, whether that's with, team hiccups on the end, us not truly understanding or articulating the scope that we needed, disconnectivity in terms of needs and scale and timelines. The list could go on, but it really was a thorn in our sides for a long time. And I know we're getting really close. We're really close. But there's still some teams that are not on 53. And this has been going on for a long time now.
And 53 is a product?
Yeah, it's like our
it's what you guys...
Yeah, it's like our internal, we want to drink our own champagne, eat our own dog food. We want to be on HubSpot, right? And use the tools that we sell to, have our teams use them too. Mm-hmm. And that was like sort of the goal. Obviously, HubSpot is at a large enterprise level. So there were some nuances that we needed to make sure were in place. But yeah, that was a journey. And I think in the interim, it caused hiccups for the team, inefficiencies for our team, whether that's with forecasting or reporting or, articulating customer need. And it slowed us down for sure.
Yeah. Well, which is, I actually just responded to, because I know you and many other leaders that we know and have met over the years at HubSpot, alignment is something that they're very passionate about. Mm. Brian Garvey, who I know you worked, very closely with, is one of those people, and he talks about alignment all the time. And in fact, he just posted something over the weekend about alignment, and that I responded to, because this is actually something that Amy and I have seen over the last few months, through the podcast, in fact. And then, of course, through our work at Dynamico, is we keep talking about alignment, but really what it comes down to, alignment doesn't seem to be enough anymore, because, you can align your people, you can align your processes, and you can align your data, and you can align your tech stack and have an integrated tech stack. So then what's missing? What's missing is the orchestration of all of that. And that was my response to Brian, was we all love alignment, but aligning just, one set of things doesn't seem to be enough anymore. And we haven't even talked about product yet, right? Or services, depending on what kind of business you're in. So it's our responsibility as leaders in any business is how do you orchestrate the alignment of all these different moving parts in a cross-functional nature, which we all know when you get it right, that's when the magic really happens. So it has to be cross-functional in nature, because that is, using your term, to me, that is part of the Holy Grail. But it's not easy to do, but it's also not that complicated when you again, one of the other responsibilities we have as leaders is to continuously simplify things, right? So in order to continuously improve, you have to continuously simplify. And orchestration seems like a really complicated thing to do when you have so many things going on, but that's ultimately what you have to get done. And I'm guessing Dharmesh actually just posted something, I think it was this morning, that HubSpot is doing its, annual, strategy offsite, which I'm guess is where a lot of the orchestration would be happening for HubSpot. But, orchestrating a 7,000 plus employee business is very different to a lot of the clients that we work with that are 200 or maybe 1,000 people. Even there, it's not easy, and you've seen that, you experienced that at HubSpot, where when HubSpot was well below 1,000 people, and even then, orchestrating all these things was complicated. But anyway, this is just something that I'm trying to figure out myself right now, and I'm going to be talking a lot about. So, do you have any other sort of perspective on when you think about alignment of all these? Amy mentioned it earlier again. People, process, data, and technology. Again, they all need to be aligned so that your go-to-market model works. But do you have any other perspective on how you orchestrate those to all work together?
Yeah. So the annual planning process is, really well articulated at HubSpot. And, like you said, it starts next month and it goes for, some period of time, right? It's not just a month and then it's done. There's numerous stages within the annual planning process.
Right.
I think the most complicated stage is once annual planning gets all wrapped up.
Absolutely.
Right?
Is the execution of it. Yeah.
So you got leadership all, singing on the same hymn sheet to some degree. There may be various opinions on how things are going to get done. And, one thing that I have seen is that you may all think that that's what you agreed on in the moment, in the meeting, in the room where the decision was made. But then there can be other, follow-ups that you have to kind of keep connected with, right? And I think it's sort of like, we were all together in this room. We all agreed this, but then there were some tweaks made, right? And how do those like little changes, get ironed out quickly and then communicated quickly so that by the time the execution happens, there isn't, but I thought we said this. And now there's like this, and usually the pieces are small, but they're enough to, leave someone questioning the process, right? So I would say like that moment between, you're wrapping up the planning session, you're communicating out, this is what we agreed on. And then there's like that, that sort of bridge between that moment and maybe like some details that get ironed out, making sure that that is a smooth bridge and that those folks, feel connected with whatever final decisions were made. I think it's really important for the leaders that walk away from those meetings to feel like, oh, okay, here's exactly what we agreed on. And then when you get into the, execution process, it's, making sure that there is a collaborative, connected process that is communicated often at the highest level and through all various levels, and providing as much context and details and sort of taking the guesswork out of how do you communicate this down to your teams, whether that's providing slides or summaries or, sort of teeing it up so that every leader at all levels feel like they have like a great sense of how does this strategy connect and how do I bring this to life for my own team.
Yeah, which makes total sense. And of course, you can see how that becomes more complicated the larger, a business becomes and the more layers of management and communication you have. But, ultimately, though, it all comes back to solving for the customer, right? I think, that's, some of the partners that are most passionate about their partnership with HubSpot feel that that's one of the things that really connects us to HubSpot's philosophy and direction, is that we're always solving for the customer. And we hear this a lot where the example that's given is there's a lot of software and technology that's used in businesses. And in most categories, it's, well, we just use the software or the technology that we hate the least. But when it comes to HubSpot, people actually say, well, but HubSpot is different. We actually love to use HubSpot, and that you don't hear that about a lot of SaaS or software technology products. But of course, that always reminds us that we're implementing the right software and integrating the right software when we hear that kind of feedback, because we cannot solve for our clients if HubSpot isn't able to solve for the HubSpot customer.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Can you think of any specific examples of where the customer success team has brought back to the product team? Like, here's an area where we're really lacking and we can help our customers hit some home runs if we could just add this feature or this widget?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the earlier days, the conversation with product was much more fluid, right? Especially when we were, building out EMEA and we were providing product with, hey, the date and how we list the date in our tool is, not
Backwards, yeah.
backwards,
Yep.
like, little things like that. And that was like, hey, product, we got to fix this immediately.
Yes.
Like, we're hearing this every day. And then there was like, obviously, as we got bigger, we couldn't be accepting, feedback like that.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the product team got a lot more rigorous in terms of how they, capture feedback from our teams. But what we did was implement an opportunity for our customer success folks to tag challenges with customers, in the tool, right? And, over the course of the year, we would train the team to say, okay, if you've seen a challenge, that is product related, it's really a pain point, tag it here, articulate the problem. And our customer experience team or customer experience management team would basically pull those roadblocks, is what we call them, together and then share that at a larger level with the, senior executive leadership team to say, from a data perspective, these are the roadblocks. This is the biggest pain points that are hitting our customers, and we need you to take some action on it. And where does this fall within your remit, within the roadmap? And that would fall through for like, whether it's product or whether there's like, things that we're listing about, challenges within the, the customer experience, the go-to-market experience. And then with enough data, because I think that there can be, and I've seen this a lot happen specifically in EMEA, where we were pounding the table for something desperately, but then it was, well, like, how many customers are you talking about? Like, are you talking about like tens of thousands, or like, okay, there's like 100 really noisy customers. And it's, obviously you have to make choices when product needs to dig in, and I'll use GDPR as a great example, right? Like privacy. Yep. We were shouting at the rooftops in EMEA on like the privacy issues. And it took a long time, longer than I want to admit to really get, our product and our team officially focus, whether that was with legal documentation or actually like, product. It just took time. And the best way to go about it is to make a case that shows the data, shows the impact, and shows the severity of it across not just, one group of customers, but all.
I keep wanting to ask questions, related to the differences between the North American market and the European market, but that might not be all that useful to our listeners.
Yeah.
I have to ask one though, which is, so, one of the differences, having lived and worked in EMEA and, in Africa before that, and then, moving to the US 12 years ago, the growth goals that typically occur within an American company, for example, are typically way more aggressive than what you see in Europe. So, and most people would agree that, the US is the country for entrepreneurism, whereas, in EMEA, most, whether it's, the DACH countries or France or Spain or UK, I mean, they're happier with slower growth. Did you notice a difference going from the US to EMEA and then coming back? Did you see any differences in how aggressive the growth goals were of HubSpot customers in EMEA versus in North America?
Good question. I think that there are differences, but I think the way that we saw it was that whether a customer's growth goals are aggressive as, the North American customers, they were, for the most part, what we saw was the opportunity that these customers had, whether it wasn't, okay, I've, 10x'd my return here, but I've made these remarkable gains. I can see improvement. I am beyond my overall expectation. I think with the EMEA customers, if it made sense to them, if there was growth, if there was an opportunity, if they saw the larger opportunity, they were relatively satisfied, I think, and bought in to the product. And they were very strategic about purchasing the software as well. I think they're a lot more considerate around, how do I bake this into my day? How do I make time to make this work? And I think that, like anything else, there is a level of, you might want to grow 10x, but are you willing to put the effort into it? And I think that there is a level of, I'm going to be thoughtful and put time aside to make this work myself. And that, I'm not saying it's very like high level. It's not like
Sure.
everybody did this, but
Yeah,
there's definitely like a more thoughtful, strategic process that I saw happen with our, EMEA customers. And, American customers, while they want to grow fast and they're really excited, there's a lot happening, right? And there is a level of distraction. And I think that, like, I know we say this all the time, and I'm sure you heard this before, like, just because you sign up for the gym membership doesn't mean you're going to lose, 40 pounds. You've got to do the work. And I think that the work can be done if you make time, you're thoughtful, and slow down sometimes to do it. And I certainly, don't get me wrong, there's some absolute incredible growth-oriented, moving fast, great success stories out of NAM as well as EMEA. But I think that, it's the tortoise hare situation to some extent. There is, maybe that slower roll gets you there when you take it at the steps that match with the pace that you are accustomed to.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that I often thought when I started thinking about this a few years ago was that the inbound philosophy, which is maybe a little more diluted today than it was 5 and 10 years ago, just seemed like a better fit for Europe than for the US.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that actually fits pretty well with your explanation, where people are thoughtful, and they like the idea of not shouting at their customers to buy from them, but rather have their customers come to them when they're ready for their products or services. Whereas in the US traditionally, where the sort of the advertising market has always been bigger and louder, where it worked until,
it didn't.
Yeah, until it didn't. That was one of the things that I always thought was maybe a bigger factor, and I think it fits with what you're saying.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but I do like the tortoise and the hare analogy too.
That is good. It's kind of a philosophy, and I don't know, I just kept thinking about being really intentional about their decision to purchase the software, and then how they were going to, like you said, incorporate it into their everyday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very intentional.
And that's the key to anything that technology you buy. If you're thinking about it, how does this incorporate it into my everyday? How we're going to make it work?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has great intentions, but when it actually comes to doing, that's where it breaks.
Yeah. Well, you described to me previously that evaluating technology and rolling it out is the bane of your existence. I want to know what you implemented that scarred you so badly.
Scars.
Feel that way.
I mean, there's been a bunch of stuff that we've tried to implement. The key is, again, I think I talked about this earlier, is like, okay, why are you implementing it? And how does this relate to strategy? And how is it going to either solve a customer problem or create need or create great returns for the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's a little bit of like, I think, this might happen. There is certainly some guesswork that goes into it. You do your darndest to get into the details. and make a solid recommendation based off of how it's going to improve customer experience or improve, customers' usage and activation. One thing that didn't go so hot for us at the start was we were trying to better understand time that people were putting into customers. Like, what were people doing, right? And to better understand, how do we, create hiring models? What is actually happening within the sausage making of providing service to our customers, like
skill sets that they would
need. So we did a time tracking exercise.
Okay.
Now, there's a software, believe it or not, that helps enable time tracking. And, we implemented, we shared the vision, but nobody wants to track their time.
It does sound pretty painful.
Nobody wants to get into the minutia of I did this for X amount of hours, or I took this and ultimately there was no judgment. At HubSpot, you take your personal time, you work on your own time. And so it wasn't about, big brothers watching. It was literally about understanding, what's this experience looking like today? Because OCC is evolving. Where are the disconnectivities that's happening across the team? How do we improve it? How do we make your job easier? How do we make the customer experience easier? How do we better understand what if you're, working too much? Then how do we hire, and figure that out to alleviate your own job? But that's a hard one to sell, right, to a team.
Yeah.
And I think in certain teams, it worked better than others, but certainly I feel like there's some battle wounds there with time tracking and helping the team understand the importance of that.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. I would imagine there's a lot of multitasking going on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so in my mind, I'm thinking okay, if you're switching, in your mind and from one screen to the next, I can see how that would just add another layer of complexity rather than simplifying, at least at the onset.
Yeah.
Adding more complexity.
Adds real friction. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Oh,
Colleen.
I appreciate it. Right.
Well, but
I'm all the better for it.
Yeah.
Right.
But at the same time, I think one of the things that you just reminded me about, Colleen, was, I remember Halligan saying to me, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 years ago, and I've heard it a few times, obviously, since, but HubSpot does have this culture, which again, it becomes harder, obviously, as the organization grows, but it's one of the many great organizations that believes that feedback is the breakfast of champions, right? So this continuous feedback and people, and it also speaks to the kind of people that you're, and I think you've actually mentioned this a couple of times, where the people that you're hiring, they need to be adaptable, they need to be open to change. And part of that is also being open to giving and receiving feedback. That is such a powerful thing in a growing team, and it's such a necessary thing in a fast growing team. And I think sort of is one of the key ingredients that leads to a good employee experience, which we talk about relatively frequently as being foundational to having a good customer experience. So maybe to sort of, as we start wrapping up here, how do you think about, because ultimately how I've kind of thought about this conversation is, we've sort of set it up that why do some companies scale and grow better than others, right? And there's a bunch of different things that go into that, but ultimately customer experience is a critical component of growth. But then if you take it a step further back, how do you make sure that your teams, especially your customer-facing teams, but really all teams where there's a touch point in the customer journey, how do you make sure that your employee experience is such that your teams can provide a great customer experience?
Yeah. So how, if I can summarize, how do you keep your teams motivated, excited, and that sort of transpires into the experience that they bring to the customers themselves? And I think that's culture. That's the environment that you build. And I think that HubSpot's culture has evolved so much over the years, from the early days to there was a real sense of work hard, play hard, to a mature organization that has various needs across different teams, whether there's, families or obligations and that various folks had across the organization that we were trying to meet. And I think that everyone needs to feel like there's a safe place for them to come and be themselves on their teams, of course, but outside of that too, where they can learn and be collaborative in a way that, resonates with them, especially in this remote first world, right? And I think that's the tricky, we went from, everybody's in the office, everybody's connected that way, to now there's folks across very disparate parts of the world. How do you create a culture which motivates them? And obviously, HubSpot's culture code has evolved over the years too. And we've implemented ERGs, employee relationship groups that really recognize various groups that we have within the business and support them and provide, resources as well as programming, and honing in on what those programs are and making the right, making choices around where we want to invest and what resonates with our business, I think is a massive aspect for, anyone to be able to participate in and say, hey, I just spent an hour on a live event talking with folks around the globe that want to talk about this subject matter, or we're listening to an HBS professor comes in and is sharing like insight on a case. And, that's stuff that allows for you to grow, whether that's, personally, professionally. It also allows you sort of to check out from the day to day, because it can be, a lot. And when you have a moment of, wow, I just spent an hour, in this real different space than I'm normally in, now I'm going to pick up the phone and have that conversation with the customer or send that email. There's some like something lifted off of you. And it doesn't, I'm sure it's not perfect, obviously, but I do think that there's no water bubbler moment anymore. There's no chance to, bump into someone in the hall and have a really interesting 15-minute conversation. So how do you create these water bubbler moments that allow people to connect on topics of interest in an environment that feels safe and right for the business to support? I think that's really, really important, and connecting it back to the business mission, helping millions of organizations grow better. I mean, that's exciting. Like that's exciting. That's a really motivating mission for anyone to get behind, to feel that they're supporting customer growth. And there's so many beautiful stories over the years of customers telling HubSpot, I wouldn't have been here if it wasn't for this, this, and that. And that's also like being able to weave those customer stories into, whether that's company meetings, helping anyone that, whether you're in product or RevOps or on the legal team, to help them understand like, wow, we're really doing something impactful for a customer. There's some really beautiful stories. So I guess to summarize, there's a whole bunch of culture stuff that needs to happen that you need to invest in. And then there's that mission piece that needs to be, woven into the everyday of tell those great stories of the customers that motivate people to continue to show up.
Right. You're reinforcing why what they're doing matters.
Exactly.
Yeah, to them personally, as well as the team that they work with, and then ultimately the organization. Yeah. Colleen, thanks again so much for joining us. It was great to see you again, and please keep us in the loop of whatever you do next.
Absolutely. I will. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, appreciate it so much.
Did you enjoy this episode?
Find more at RevOpsChampions.com.